Brenda thought she knew everything about her driver, Richard, but what if he wasn't just a driver? What if he was spying on her all along? "You've been judging me," Richard said, his voice cold as ice. "But you never asked the right questions. The shocking truth will make you question everyone around you." Before we dive into this amazing story, if you're new, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Don't forget to drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Brenda Anderson was the kind of woman who had everything most people could dream of: wealth, influence, and a company that was a force to be reckoned with. At 50 years old, she sat at the head of a global empire, her business acumen sharp, her decisions decisive. Every part of her life had been meticulously curated to perfection. From the power suits she wore to the high-powered meetings she attended, control was everything, and nothing got past her. But there was one thing Brenda didn't want to admit. She had a habit of judging people too quickly, especially those she didn't understand. The morning of an important meeting, she found herself once again in the back of her car, gliding smoothly through the streets of the city. Richard, her driver, was up front, hands on the wheel, his posture perfect, as always. He was a quiet man, polite but distant, with a certain air of mystery that Brenda couldn't shake. She had hired him a year ago, yet she didn't know a thing about him. He was always composed, never raising his voice, never speaking more than necessary. Today, though, Brenda's mind wasn't focused on the day's agenda. It was on Richard. She glanced at him through the rearview mirror, watching the way he held his gaze on the road, his face unreadable. He didn't seem like the kind of person who would understand the pressure of her world. He was too calm, too reserved. Brenda couldn't help but wonder, who is this man really? Does he even know how to handle a powerful woman like me? Her fingers tapped restlessly on her phone screen, scrolling through emails, but her thoughts kept drifting back to them. Richard had come highly recommended by a friend, a business associate who had vouched for his reliability. But that didn't ease the unease brewing in Brenda's chest. The quietness was unsettling, almost like Richard was hiding something. There was an air about him that made her skin crawl. The way he never asked for anything, never expressed much, seemed too calculated. She found herself questioning his intentions. What if he's too good to be true? The cars slowed to a stop as they hit a traffic jam. The time ticked on, the minutes dragging as she waited to get to her meeting. Brenda shifted in her seat, glancing at Richard again. That's when she heard it, a sudden shift in his tone as he spoke on the phone. The soft click of his Bluetooth headset was barely audible, but his voice wasn't. He was speaking in Spanish, a language Brenda could only understand in small phrases. Yet what she heard was enough to send a shock through her. Richard was discussing business, real estate deals, high-level strategies, and negotiations that seemed far beyond his usual role as her driver. The more he spoke, the more Brenda's suspicions grew. Why would a man like him know so much about real estate, about finances, about business deals that sounded like something straight out of one of her boardroom meetings? Her heart raced. Could this man be involved in something dangerous? A spy? A fraud? The possibilities flashed in her mind. She could barely breathe as she pieced together her thoughts, trying to make sense of the situation. Richard had always been so calm, almost too perfect. It didn't make sense. How could someone like him, someone she had assumed was just a driver, know so much? Her fingers tightened around her phone, her knuckles going white. I can't keep him around. Not after this. This is too much. He's a risk. Brenda's mind was already made up. She had to act fast. She would deal with him after the meeting, fire him immediately. That was the only way to ensure there were no secrets left in the shadows. But just as she prepared to speak, the traffic began to move, and the moment passed. Brenda's plan was set, but fate, as always, had its own way of rewriting the script. As the days passed, Brenda found it impossible to get Richard out of her mind. His quiet presence, the way he kept to himself, seemed to draw her attention more with each passing day. He was always polite, professional, and never seemed to show any emotion beyond his calm exterior. But the longer she watched him, the more she became convinced that something wasn't right. There was an edge to him, something hidden beneath the surface, something he wasn't revealing. Brenda was no stranger to reading people. It was one of the reasons she had built her empire. She knew how to gauge a person's character, their motives. But Richard was different. She couldn't figure him out. And the more she couldn't figure him out, the more suspicious she became. It was a cold, clear afternoon when she was invited to a high-stakes VIP dinner. The event was important, one of those gatherings where deals could be made or broken with a single conversation. It was the kind of event where every detail mattered, where every decision could affect the future of her company. It was the kind of event where she couldn't afford to be distracted. And yet, as she sat in the back of Richard's car on the way there, she found herself thinking only about him. Something about that afternoon felt different. As they neared the venue, Brenda's mind wandered again to Richard. His calm demeanor, his silence, it all seemed so carefully constructed, too deliberate. She wondered if she was overthinking things, but deep down, she felt a gnawing unease, like there was something she was missing. When the car finally came to a stop at the entrance, Brenda opened the door and stepped out, ready to face the evening. She moved toward the entrance of the venue, but just before stepping inside, something caught her ear. Richard was on the phone again, and this time his voice was unmistakably different. The words flowed smoothly, with an ease that surprised her. He was speaking in French. Brenda froze. It wasn't just that Richard was speaking French, it was the way he was speaking. His tone was confident, authoritative even. He wasn't discussing simple pleasantries or casual topics. From what Brenda could make out, the conversation seemed to revolve around complex business negotiations, the kind of talk she'd hear in boardrooms, not in the back of her car. Her heart skipped a beat. Not only does he speak Spanish, but now French too. The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. There was more to this man than she had ever imagined. She had thought him a simple driver, someone to take her from point A to point B, nothing more. But now, everything seemed different. How could she have missed this? Brenda quickly glanced back over her shoulder, but Richard had already finished his call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. She couldn't help but feel a tight knot in her stomach. Who was this man? What was he hiding? The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. Why hadn't Richard ever shared these talents with her? He was supposed to be just her driver, nothing more. But now, she was beginning to realize how little she truly knew about him. And that unsettled her deeply. Her mind raced with possibilities. What was he doing here, really? Was he someone else entirely? The French, the Spanish. How many other languages did he speak? And why didn't he share them with her? Was he playing some kind of game? Or was there something more at play? Something bigger. She couldn't keep living in the dark. She had to know the truth. Brenda wasn't someone who let questions like this go unanswered. She needed answers, and fast. This wasn't just about a driver anymore. Richard had become a puzzle that needed to be solved, and she was determined to uncover every piece. She couldn't just sit back and wait for him to reveal himself. No, if she wanted to understand what was really going on, she would need to take matters into her own hands. So, with a determined glance, she turned on her heel and headed back toward the car. Brenda had made up her mind. She was going to follow Richard. The decision to follow Richard had felt reckless from the start, but now that she was in motion, her curiosity was overpowering, and she couldn't bring herself to stop. Brenda had always prided herself on being a person who took control, who made calculated decisions. But now, here she was, trailing her driver like a criminal, heart racing in her chest. She had told Richard to drop her off at a quiet cafe, telling him she needed some time to herself, a story that seemed perfectly innocent. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, though, her entire demeanor changed. She watched as Richard's car pulled away, blending into the streets ahead of her. Brenda moved quickly, keeping her distance, but always close enough to watch. What am I doing? This is insane. She couldn't stop the thought from circling in her mind. But the pull of the unknown was too strong to resist. Richard had been so quiet, so careful with his actions. She had never imagined that this man, this simple driver, could have a hidden life, let alone a life that might be more complicated than her own. As she trailed him, the streets became quieter. Brenda's footsteps echoed in the empty alleys, her heart pounding faster with each step. She watched Richard move through the city like someone who knew exactly where he was going, like someone who belonged. Her eyes narrowed as she followed him, trying to make sense of the odd feeling growing in her gut. Then she saw it. Richard approached a nondescript building, one she had passed many times before, but never thought twice about. He glanced around before entering, his movements quick and deliberate, as if he knew he was being watched. Brenda's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This is what he's been hiding. She waited, watching the entrance like a hawk, her mind racing with questions. What was this place? Why was he here? How could she have missed this? Minutes dragged on, stretching into what felt like hours. Brenda's legs ached, but she couldn't move. She couldn't look away. The world seemed to shrink until it was just her and Richard, just waiting for the moment she would finally learn the truth. When Richard finally emerged, it wasn't alone. Another man joined him, tall and sharply dressed. Brenda had seen the man before at high-profile business events. He was one of her competitors, a man known for his ruthless tactics. Her stomach dropped. So, this is it. Richard's in business with my competitors. The two men shook hands, speaking rapidly, their words a blur of Italian that Brenda couldn't fully grasp. She felt a chill crawl up her spine as she realized the depth of the situation. Richard wasn't just a driver. He was more than she had ever imagined. He was involved in something much larger than her. Brenda felt the heat rise in her chest, the anger bubbling up. How long has he been working with them? What kind of game has he been playing? But as she moved toward them, her mind racing with accusations, Richard looked up and saw her before she could speak. His expression was calm, almost too calm, like he had been expecting this moment all along. I was wondering when you would come, Richard said quietly, his voice smooth and unbothered. Brenda's legs felt like jelly, and her stomach twisted into a tight knot. She hadn't expected this. He knew. What? You knew. Her voice came out hoarse, the disbelief obvious in her tone. Richard didn't flinch. He simply nodded, his eyes steady as he regarded her. You've been judging me, haven't you? You think I'm just a driver, but you never stopped to ask what I could offer you. Brenda stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. She had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable. The weight of his words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. She had always assumed Richard was just another employee, someone beneath her, someone to be dismissed. But now, everything was shifting, everything was changing. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Her voice cracked, the desperation creeping in. Richard's gaze didn't waver as he spoke. I've been hired by your biggest competitor to spy on your business for months. He paused, his words hitting like a punch to the gut. But I never betrayed you, Brenda. Not once. I've been watching you because I see potential in you. You have more than you realize. Brenda's heart slammed against her chest, her mind scrambling to make sense of what he was saying. Her whole body felt heavy, weighed down by the realization that everything she thought she knew about her world was wrong. I've been watching you, Brenda, Richard continued, his voice steady, almost reassuring. And I see how much you could grow if you just let go of your prejudices. I can help you, not as a driver, but as someone who can teach you to see the world differently. Her mind reeled, emotions swirling inside her like a storm. She had misjudged him. She had seen only what she wanted to see, a simple man who fit neatly into the role she'd assigned him. But Richard was far from simple, and now everything was on the table. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for, suddenly felt fragile, vulnerable. Richard wasn't finished. If you want to beat your competition, It won't be by working harder. It will be by understanding people. People like me. Brenda stood there, her legs weak beneath her. She had come here to find answers, but now she was left with more questions than ever before. Richard wasn't just a driver, and he wasn't just working for her competitor. He was offering her something more, something that could change everything for her business. But at what cost? Could she truly trust him after everything she had just learned? She had a choice: keep her prejudice and lose everything, or open her heart to a new way of thinking and change her life forever. The next day, Brenda sat at her desk, her fingers anxiously tapping against the surface. The weight of everything she had learned the day before hung over her like a thick fog. She couldn't get the image of Richard's calm, composed face out of her mind, the way he had spoken, the things he had said. He had offered her an opportunity, a chance to learn, to grow, to see the world from a completely different perspective. But there was still so much she didn't understand. She wasn't sure if she could trust him. The trust she had once placed in him was shattered the moment she discovered the truth. Yet, there was a part of her that couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration for him. He was playing a game far more intricate than she could have imagined. He had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. When Richard entered her office, he was the same as ever, quiet, poised, his expression neutral. But this time, Brenda could feel the weight of the conversation before they even spoke. She was about to confront him once more, but this time, it would be different. This time, she needed answers, and she needed his help. "Sit down," Brenda said, her voice steady, but her mind racing. "We need to talk." Richard did as instructed, sitting across from her. His calm demeanor never wavered, even though Brenda's heart was pounding. She had invited him here to make things right, but part of her still wasn't sure what she wanted from him. She had been so sure of herself, so confident in her ability to make decisions. Yet Richard had turned everything upside down. She took a deep breath before speaking, her eyes meeting his. "Can you help me?" she asked, the words slipping out more uncertainly than she intended. "Will you teach me? Will you show me how to see the world the way you do?" For a moment, Richard didn't say anything. He just looked at her with those unreadable eyes. Then, a small, kind smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Of course," he said, his voice soft, but filled with certainty. "But there's one more thing you should know." Brenda frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" Richard's gaze softened, his smile turning into something more serious. "I was never hired to spy on you, Brenda. I was hired to help you." Brenda's mind went blank. Her heart skipped a beat as she processed his words. What was he saying? Had she heard him correctly? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Richard continued, his eyes shining with a quiet intensity. "I've been working for you all along. I knew you needed someone who could guide you, someone who could teach you not just about business, but about the world itself. I was hired to help you grow, to help you see things differently." Brenda's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea how to process this new information. The man she had thought of as nothing more than a quiet, unassuming driver had been her secret weapon all along. All the time she had spent questioning him, doubting him, and yet here he was, offering her the very thing she had been searching for without even knowing it. Her mind reeled as she tried to piece together everything that had just been said. Richard wasn't working for her competitor. He hadn't been spying on her. He had been sent to her, to guide her, to help her see the potential she couldn't even recognize in herself. He had been in her corner the entire time, even when she had written him off as nothing more than a simple driver. Brenda's hands shook as she processed the full weight of what Richard had revealed. This was more than a business deal. This was personal. This man had given up everything. A CEO position, his status, his security, just to help her succeed. And in that moment, as Brenda looked into his eyes, she realized something else. Richard had been offering her the keys to something she couldn't have unlocked on her own. She had been blind to it all, trapped in her assumptions and prejudices. But now, the truth was clear. Richard had seen something in her that no one else had. He had believed in her potential when she had barely believed in herself. And all this time, Brenda whispered, the realization sinking in, "You've been working for me." Richard nodded, his smile never fading. "Yes, and now, it's time for you to see what you're truly capable of." The truth hit her like a tidal wave. She had spent so long judging Richard, assuming he was just a driver, just another cog in the machine. But now, the game had changed. And in that moment, Brenda realized the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes, the people who seem the least likely to help you are the ones who can change your life forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please hit that like button, subscribe for more gripping tales, and share this with your friends who love good stories. Also, drop a comment below. I want to know what you thought and where you're watching from. I love connecting with you all.